Welcome and good evening. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. I hope this is a wonderful respite from everything going on in the world. My name is Paul Roach and I support the fundraising team here at HMRI. Before we begin, I just want to pause and take a moment to recognize that our community is still reeling from the Eaton fire. I know there are several of us here tonight who lost homes and businesses, and we all know somebody who was affected. We hold this space tonight with deep compassion, and I hope you all know that all of us here at HMRI will continue to be partners as we navigate the next years together, rebuilding and recovering from this. If you or anyone in your circles needs help with insurance forms or FEMA applications, I've been helping folks for the last couple of weeks. Grab me afterwards, I'll give you my card. We're all getting through this together. I'm more than happy to help out any way I can. We also have colleagues over at Hahn & Hahn, the law firm downtown. They've offered to do pro bono consulting for anybody that would like to talk to a lawyer. So that's also a resource you can take advantage of. Our conversation here tonight is both timely and critical. If you watch PBS NewsHour like I do, this past Saturday, they did a piece on an AI healthcare transcription tool that hallucinated or made up medical interactions. As AI tools continue to be more and more part of our day-to-day lives, it's essential that we understand both the advantages and also the risks that this transformative technology brings to our healthcare. This evening's discussion will help shed light on the complexities of AI in medicine, and we are fortunate to have a distinguished expert guiding the conversation. You've probably figured out that tonight's moderator is not Dr. Julia Bradsher. She is unfortunately out under the weather, but we wanted to have this conversation anyway, so it's my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Robert Kloner. Dr. Kloner serves as the Chief Science Officer and Director of Cardiovascular Research here at HMRI. This year, he celebrates his 10th anniversary at the Institutes, a remarkable tenure. He is also a professor of medicine at the University of Southern California and recently was appointed as a visiting associate professor at Caltech. Dr. Kloner is well known for his groundbreaking contributions to cardiovascular medicine, including helping to define the concepts of no reflow in the heart and stunned myocardium. He has authored or co-authored more than 770 peer-reviewed papers and 18 medical texts. He is one of the world's most highly cited scientific authors.
Recording in progress.
Beyond his scientific achievements, Bob is also a published classical music composer. He released the neoclassical piano album Tunes from Edmondson Alley in 2024. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Dr. Bob Kloner.
Thank you very much, Paul. I want to thank everybody for your participation tonight. We're looking forward to this evening. It's our first on-site evening event since the fires, and I will tell you that the air is very clean in here now. It's been cleaned out for the last 2 weeks, so we're just delighted that you're all here tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about critical conversations on artificial intelligence, or AI, and biotechnology and medicine, challenges and breakthroughs. We all know that AI is rapidly changing our world, and it is undoubtedly a very powerful, transformative biotechnology phenomena, and it is going to affect the future of medicine. However, this new frontier also does present challenges, and tonight we'll explore this new frontier with leading experts in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I'd like to introduce our panelists to you. First is Dr. Assad Oberai, PhD. He is the Hughes Professor of Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering in the department at Viterbi School at USC of Engineering, where he also served as the Vice Dean for Research. Prior to joining USC, he was a professor in the Department of Mechanical Aerospace and Nuclear Engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies in the School of Engineering, and the Associate Director of the Scientific Computational Research Center. He received a PhD from Stanford, an MS from the University of Colorado, and a bachelor's degree from Osmania University, all in mechanical engineering. Assad is a fellow of the American Institute of Medicine and Biology, the American Academy of Mechanics, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and the U.S. Association of Computational Mechanics. So welcome tonight, Assad. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Niema Pahlevan, PhD. He is an associate professor of aerospace and mechanical engineering and medicine in the Division of Cardiovascular Medicine at USC. Prior to joining USC, Dr. Pahlevan was the James G. Boswell Postdoctoral Scholar at Caltech and a clinical research investigator at HMRI. He received his BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Tehran, MS in mechanical engineering from California State University, Northridge, and PhD in bioengineering from Caltech. He is the recipient of the NSF Career Award and the American Heart Association Career Development Award. In 2022, he was appointed the holder of the Gordon S. Marshall Early Career Chair in Engineering, and in 2024, he was honored as a Fellow of the American Heart Association, and he is also a visiting scientist at HMRI and is actively doing research with our group and with Dr. Alavi. So let's welcome Niema. Finally, Dr. Rashid Alavi, PhD, is the current James G. Boswell Postdoctoral Fellow at Caltech and HMRI. He completed his doctoral studies in mechanical cardiovascular engineering at USC, focusing on the development of hybrid physics-based, data-driven approaches for non-invasively assessing hemodynamics of heart attack and heart failure. Dr. Alavi earned his BS and MS in mechanical engineering from Isfahan University of Technology in Iran. He has contributed to numerous clinical and preclinical studies conducting at USC Hospital and HMRI, advancing technology for the diagnosis of myocardial infarction and heart failure, and attempting to prevent heart disease. Dr. Alavi has earned multiple awards and national recognition for his work on AI and the prevention of cardiovascular disease. I just want to mention that both Niema and Rashid were former, Niema was a former Boswell Fellow and Rashid is the current Boswell Fellowship. And this is a fellowship that began about 50 years ago in 1974. It is a joint effort between Caltech and HMRI. So these bright young gentlemen have spent about 50% of their time at Caltech and 50% of HMRI during that postdoctoral fellowship. And we're just delighted to have them as members of this group tonight. And I was lucky to be their HMRI mentors while they were Boswell Fellows. So let me start out by saying that we all understand that AI is a fascinating phenomenon. You can't get away from it. If you're reading the newspaper, you're going to see something about AI every day. And I want to discuss some basic terminology before we get started. So I thought, all right, how do we define AI? And I thought the best way to do this was to go to my cell phone and ask ChatGPT, which is an artificial intelligence app to define AI. So I basically said, okay, AI, tell us what you are. And this is what AI said. ChatGPT said, artificial intelligence, AI, refers to the simulation of human intelligent processes by computer systems. These processes include learning, the acquisition of information and rules using it, reasoning, the ability to solve problems through logical deduction, and self-correction. So now I want to ask our panelists, and we'll start with Dr. Pahlevan. How would you define and introduce us to the concept of AI? What are the basics of AI, and how does it differ from the concept of machine learning? Niema.
Well, thank you for the question. Well, I mean, you just mentioned the definition of AI, but if I want to summarize it, is AI is a system that perform tasks that require the human intelligence. In that sense, it's a system that makes machines smart. And machine learning is a subset of the AI or artificial intelligence. But machine learning, what it does, it's an algorithm that receive data and learn from data to make decisions. when it's come to the medicine or biotech diagnostics or some sort of an outcome. If I want to give an example, let's say if you have an algorithm and this algorithm is predefined with certain rules and ifs that you give patients information to that, and the outcome is that if the patient has this infectious disease or the heart disease or not, that's an AI, that's not a machine learning. But if you get a lot of information about two group of people, the one with the infectious disease and the other one without, and then let the algorithm learn those ifs and conditions and come up with a decision, that's going to be the machine learning.
Okay.
I hope I did justice for the question.
Okay. Dr. Oberai, how would you define AI and how does it differ from machine learning?
Yes, I think the definition that you talked about and what Niema talked about for AI make complete sense to me. So it's obviously not human intelligence, but some machine which demonstrates human-like intelligence, right? So I think that's AI. And to distinguish AI from machine learning, I have this favorite example that I talk about, so I'm going to give you that example. It has nothing to do with medicine, but it's an example that I think you will relate with. So if you have a self-driving car, that's an AI system. That's an artificial intelligence system, right? Now, if you sort of go in and look at all the components that make that car self-driving, right? So there's many things going on. So they've got cameras. So the cameras are looking out, they're taking videos. And then those videos are being converted into, they're being segmented, right? So you get this image and you have to see, well, this part of the image is road, this part is a footpath, this part is tree, here I have pedestrians. So there is an algorithm which takes an image and does this type of what people call semantic segmentation. It's like looking at a CT scan and segmenting out where the tumor is, right? So it's exactly the same problem. So the algorithm that does that, semantic segmentation, that's based on machine learning. And so the way I would define machine learning, that is any algorithm that learns from data is machine learning, right? But the self-driving car is way more than just that algorithm which converts an image into a semantically segmented image, right? It's much more than that, because once you do that, the next thing you have to do is you have to have a decision system which then tells the car to go in a certain direction. Then you have a control system which tells it to correct itself when something else happens. So there is many, many more components that go into building AI, and machine learning is an important part of it, but not all of it. And that's exactly what Niema said. It's a subset.
Thank you. Rashid, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we got a very nice definitions by Dr. Oberai and Pahlevan. What I want to add is that basically artificial intelligence is the bigger umbrella that you have any sort of intelligence. So it can be as easy as commanding the computer to do something, but have them think instead of us. So what is not artificial intelligence is that you force computers to do something for you, that you command them. So the difference is that the computers or the machines do something that you don't command them. So, and then machine learning, as both of the panelists said, it's just a subsection of the AI that the predictions are made based off of the data, not the commands or anything. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So now I would like to ask each of you to briefly discuss your own research and breakthroughs in AI, and we'll start with Dr. Oberai.
Thank you. So one really interesting and cool project that I'm working on that I'm super excited about is with a biologist colleague at USC, Peter Kuhn, and an oncologist also at USC, Jorge Neva. And this has to do with early detection of breast cancer. And the moment I say that, you're probably thinking of some AI algorithm running on mammography and trying to classify a tumor as being malignant or benign. And this is not that. This is quite different. And so I'll maybe spend a minute or two talking about it. So as if there is a cancerous tumor, some cells from the tumor sort of leak out into the vascular system. and are transported, right? And they make it all the way to your peripheral blood. And so if you take a blood draw and you remove all the red blood cells from the blood draw, and you keep only the immune cells, right? And then you tag them with certain biomarkers and look at them using immunofluorescence under a microscope. So you see a lot of cells, right? So in a given slide, you will have about roughly about 6.5 million cells to look at. That's a lot of cells to look at, right? And turns out that if there is cancer, there is going to be anywhere between, I'd say, 2 to about 50 cells that have originated in that tumor and that look different from the other cells. And so this is a perfect problem for AI or for machine learning, which is to identify these cells out of these 6.5 million cells, to find these cells that look different from the other cells, right? And when I say look different, I mean look different in an immunofluorescence image, which has multiple channels. And so that's the problem that we are solving, and we're developing AI tools to solve that problem. It's like a needle in a haystack problem, except you don't know what the needle looks like. So all you know, it's something that does not look like hay, and you're trying to find it, right? And so I'll sort of stop with what was done before, and what we are doing is slightly different there. Before this, for over 15 or 20 years, people have worked with Peter, and they've developed a rules-based kind of an approach. Like if a cell looks like this, if its diameter is so big, and if it is tortuous, if it has this type of a texture, then it could be cancer, so put it here. So there was this, right? And in contrast to this, what we are looking for, the only thing we are looking for is, if this cell does not look like most other cells, then it could be cancerous. So that's what we are really training the algorithm to look for. In the language of AI and machine learning, this is an unsupervised learning algorithm. So we're not telling it what to look for. We are just saying, find things that are rare, and it sort of looks for those and finds us for us. And in terms of the performance, what we are finding is it finds about twice as many cells as the old approach did, as many interesting cells, cancerous cells, as the old approach did. So I'm super excited about that.
Well, so that really suggests that one big application of AI is going to be diagnosis, and maybe early diagnosis, earlier than was previously possible, which is very exciting, I think.
Yeah. I agree. Okay. I think that's where we are headed.
Okay. Niema, can you tell us a little bit about your research pertaining to the role of smartphone applications in AI and heart failure?
Sure. So there are two big problems in heart failure currently. One is associated with the diagnosis of it, especially the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, but also with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. There are challenges because measuring ejection fraction is not cheap. At least you need an echo. The accuracy of echo is not good. MRI is not being reimbursed, and all those things. The second issue about heart failure is the monitoring of heart failure patient and keep them out of the hospital. So right now, I don't know right now, but the last statistic that I looked, maybe like 2-3 years ago, is that $8 billion per year being wasted for unnecessary hospitalization of a heart failure patient. So how we can solve these two problems? One related to early diagnosis, and the other one is to monitoring them. And of course, we need to do it in an inexpensive way and accessible way. Otherwise, if you want to run MRI every week for each individual, then you're just basically trying to solve poverty with lottery. So that's not going to work out. And the way we try to use and get the help from the machine learning was the other side of the machine learning, which is solving an inverse dynamical problem, solving an inverse problem. How? Well, the way we looked at the heart failure was the problem between the interaction of the heart and arterial system together. So you have this dynamical system, the heart beats, and this pressure wave and flow wave into arterial system. And those waves contained information about the vascular system and about the heart. So if you are sitting at the location that you can read those waves, let's say over the neck, when you feel the pulse. So the problem is like a radar problem, right? Radar contain information and you have a receiver, and the job of a receiver is convert that into the information that you see on your screen, on your phone, things like that. So what we did with this iPhone was that, okay, we're gonna use the iPhone to measure this pressure waveform, which is a mechanical waveform, and try to solve that inverse problem to get metrics that are relevant to heart and relevant to heart failure. So these metrics are ejection fraction and the feeling pressure at the end of diastole, also known as LVDP, left ventricular end diastolic pressure. So that's how we were trying to use AI and machine learning for heart failure. And by doing so, basically, we achieved both goals that I mentioned. One, try to make it much cheaper, and then two, try to make it accessible. And that's the way we try to use a smartphone and machine learning to do that. And the way that smartphone works is not that complicated. You put it over the carotid pulse. You take an image of a skin vibration, and from that skin vibration images, we extract the vessel dilation waveform, which is the same as a pressure waveform. Now we have the pressure waveform. The AI help us to do that inverse dynamical problem to get the metrics of the heart. Yeah, that's basically a summary of how we use AI to do that. And of course, there are other mathematical methods that we combine with that in order to make it more efficient in terms of the data requirement. And for example, if you want to send entire waveform, let's say you have a heart failure rat model, you want to study that. If you want to send the entire pressure waveform, you need a sampling of 100 point per cycle, per cardiac cycle. So those individual vectors that are going in, they have a length of 100. So what we did, we developed a mathematical method that condensed information into 4 or 5 parameters. So instead of vector of 100 going into the machine to learn, we gave a vector of length 5 going to the machine. So instead of needing 40,000 and maybe 100 1Ds, Dr. Dice, to do those experiments, complicated experiments, we can solve the problem with the 100 rats and 200 rats. So I think I talked about a little bit of the challenges in the research in that area too. But
Okay, thank you. So imagine being able to monitor your heart from the convenience of your own couch by simply taking your iPhone and shining the flashlight on your carotid pulse, because that's where this is going. So it's really fascinating stuff. Okay, let me ask Rashid now about his work in AI pertaining to heart attack and stroke.
Sure. So let me mention that actually Dr. Pahlevan was my advisor during the PhD. He's my PhD advisor. And then I was lucky also that Dr. Kloner was my clinical mentor during my PhD. So as soon as I joined Dr. Pahlevan lab, this application, this smartphone came out, and I was like, okay, I need to use this in another disease, or if I can make the most out of this. So we tried to look at the problem of heart attack, and then see if we can use the same app, the same measurement technique, and detect the heart attack at earlier stages. So the problem with heart attack is that there are 2 usual signs of heart attack when you get heart attack. One is the chest pain, and the other one is the changes in the electrocardiography, basically EKG. But the problem is that not always we have these signs. We have a whole category of the silent heart attacks. So we have 3 groups. They are called silent, clinically silent, and super silent. So silent heart attack is when you have no chest pain, but you have changes in your electrocardiogram. So you might not be able to detect if you have heart attack. You might feel you have nausea, you have dizziness, but there is no chest pain. So you might not call 911. And then you need to go to clinic, or expert people need to come to your house to take your EKG signal and see if heart attack happened. So here we have the absence of chest pain. Another category is clinically silent. That means you have the chest pain, but you go to clinic, you do the EKG measurement, the EKG test, and the EKG is not showing anything, any change. So even physicians might be confused that it might not be heart attack. And then the worst case scenario is when these two symptoms are both missing together. So there is no chest pain and there is no change in the EKG. So this heart attack is very dangerous. And then unfortunately, most of the time after the patients pass away by autopsy or other techniques, they notice, oh, this was a heart attack. So I tried to tackle this problem with the use of AI. And then we said, okay, let's look into this problem in a mechanical way. So as we know, a heart is a mechanical pump. So we tracked the models that we had in Dr. Kloner lab and Dr. Dai developed, and we saw that during the progression of heart attack, there are three changes in the mechanical activities of the heart. One is reduction in the cardiac output of the heart. Basically, less flow of the heart goes to the body. Less flow of the blood goes to the body. The second one is a stiffening of the left ventricle walls and elevation of the pressure inside the left ventricle. And the third one is reduction of the contractility of the heart. So all this together gave us some clues that the pressure over the neck, the carotid artery pressure, might change during the progression of heart attack. And then we tracked the changes and we noticed some changes in the shape of waveform. But the problem was that there was no threshold to detect, to say, for example, oh, we are passing 50, so this is heart attack. We are less than 50, it's not heart attack. So that was the problem where we needed AI to filter it for us. So we used AI and we could successfully predict the heart attack at earliest stages, and that includes all types of heart attack, including the super silent ones.
The other thing that Dr. Alavi showed was that this technique could also help predict the size of the heart attack,
Yeah.
whether this is a small heart attack, a medium-sized, or a very large heart attack. So again, AI is, I think, really helpful in that area. Thank you. Okay, now let me ask the panelists this. What are the hard questions in the diagnosis and treatment of disease that AI will help researchers and physicians solve? And Dr. Oberai, do you want to start it off?
So I think maybe we'll start with diagnosis.
Okay.
So I think what we heard about from Rashid and from Niema too. So early diagnosis, I think, is an area where it can make a big impact because there are sort of these signals that are hidden that are not obvious to a human eye, which a machine learning algorithm can pick out quite easily. So I think that's it's a kind of a problem that plays to the strength of what machine learning can do. So early diagnosis, I would say, is one area that's important. And then the other one, I think, is improving accuracy. So once again, I have personal experience with this. This is collaboration with Indy Gill, who's a urologist at Keck, and Vinay Dudalwar, radiologist, where we are looking at CT images, so contrast-enhanced CT images of tumors, renal tumors, and then combining that with data, clinical data acquired from the patient as they sort of come into the clinic, and trying to predict whether a particular tumor is going to be aggressive or indolent, like what kind of therapy to decide. And that's where we've sort of found a big gain in what a machine learning algorithm could predict versus what the current state of practice is right now. So I feel like these are sort of the two areas in diagnosis and then treatment planning, where multiple sources of information have to be sort of taken together, integrated, right? That's where, again, machine learning can shine.
Okay, great. Niema?
I fully agree with everything Dr. Oberai said. The increasing the accuracy, the early diagnosis, and making the diagnosis actually easier, more accessible, cheaper will help promote preventive medicine too, and that will eventually lead into better outcome in general. Another area that AI in diagnosis can be useful is we have currently other tests and metrics that have a certain specificity and sensitivity. Some tests have very specific, not sensitive, or the other way around. And applying the AI and even on old already being used methods can improve their sensitivity and specificity by reducing some of the operator variabilities, things like that. And also in terms of a treatment, AI can help a lot. Treatment, I mean in terms of a medication development. This is like further away, but one thing that AI does and machine learning does very well is solving certain problems that it was, almost intractable or very computationally extensive in the past. And there are established methods, for example, for computational drug development that suggest that if you can solve these equations, you can do negative drug design. That means drugs that don't have side effect, only bind where they're supposed to bind. But those equations, those problems are intractable. If you want to solve it, if you have all the computers in the world, take 10 years, 20 years to solve them. But with the help of AI, it may accelerate the problem solving into a couple of order of magnitudes and make it possible in the near future.
Thank you, Rashid. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I also fully agree. I think what I'm going to add here is that AI is also very useful for the integrative decision making, as Dr. Oberai mentioned. So the problem in the healthcare is that different patients, they respond differently to diseases, to the drugs, and everything. So AI can take everything into account. For example, we can consider the race, we can consider the gender, the genetic background, the history, if the patient is a smoker or not. So all of them together, AI can take all together into account and then make the decisions. I think that is really a problem, to have a very integrative decision when we decide in the healthcare.
Thank you. So let me ask this. A lot of what we've discussed is still maybe experimental or still in experimental realm. Is AI already here in terms of diagnosis and therapy in medicine? And if not, what do you think are the first areas within medical diagnosis and therapy where AI will be very important? And we'll start with Assad, if that's okay.
Sure. So I'm not so sure. I'm not sort of clued into like what's out there right now in terms of practice. But I do want to sort of pick on what Niema said, which was about drug design. So it's there, right? I mean, the AlphaFold that was generated or created by DeepMind, they are sort of finding drugs. They are finding new immunotherapy treatments all the time, and it's making a huge impact. So I think that's one area where in medicine where it's already making an impact, and that impact is just going to grow. Yeah.
Drug discovery.
Drug discovery for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. And let my panelists
Niema.
take over.
I mean, if you're asking for a specific example, I'm biased to cardiology, of course.
Okay.
But in general, I think there are most of the currently available in the market that at least I've been exposed at AHA and other conferences for diagnosis would focus on making things that was previously invasive, non-invasive. This is one area that I saw a lot of improvement and advancement, some of them FDA approved. And the other area was basically removing that certain task that is kind of laborsome, like, reading MRI images, echo images, and getting ejection fraction just by using AI rather than an echo technician or cardiologist reading that. So these are already there. So these are the low-hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah, well,
but I think the biggest impact would be on preventive medicine, I believe.
yeah. Well, I think you raised a very good point, and that's imaging. So, I mean, radiologists spend their whole days looking at X-ray images, things. Pathologists spend their whole day looking at slides, and it's long and it's laborious and it's extremely time consuming. So the concept that AI could look at these images, find pattern recognition that might help diagnosis come by quicker, I think is really going to be a very important application of AI in medicine. Looking at X-rays, looking at MRI images, looking at echocardiograms, PET scans, a whole host of imaging techniques where the diagnosis can be made faster, quicker, and maybe more accurate with AI.
Yeah, and then sort of not only looking at them individually, but sort of in an integrative way. That's also doable now, right? So there are models foundation models that'll take a pathology image and sort of take a really big pathology H&E stain image and convert that into roughly a few hundred numbers, sort of distill all that information down to a few hundred numbers. You have similar models for CT that will produce 200 numbers of their own. You simply put those two together and you feed that to a classifier, and that will tell you whether that particular tumor was cancerous or not. Yeah.
Rashid.
Yeah, so I think the answer is different from each field to the other field. I know, for example, there are some very good robots now that they're doing surgery on behalf of the surgeons. For example, in the bowel surgeries, there are the whole type of, they call it STAR robots. It's smart tissue autonomous robots, and they show that they can outperform the surgeons, actually.
Yeah, and these are already out there. I mean, these are FDA-approved devices, right?
Yes,
okay.
And they have been like more precise. There is less incision issues, and they actually outperformed some of the surgeons. But if we focus on the cardiology again, I think American Heart Association last year, they issued a statement regarding AI, and then they mentioned that AI is very useful in the cardiology in terms of detection, treatment, and therapy. And then they categorized 4 different areas for AI to take role in the cardiology. And they were, as far as I remember, they were imaging, there were electrocardiography, there were a smartphone and wearables, and also, I think, genetics. So these 4 areas, American Heart Association is already saying that these are making a good progress in the field.
Okay. Good. Okay, now I want to switch things a little bit because AI can sometimes be like a little scary. So what are the biggest ethical considerations with AI for biomedical research and in clinical applications? What are the potential problems with AI, and is there an issue of trust? Can we trust AI? Who wants to start?
I can get into this question. It's very broad, and it's one of those questions that is very easy and very difficult at the same time. There are other ethical considerations like HIPAA, patient confidentiality. All those are, existed here too. But bias is another, big issue. Although in any research, bias is a big problem, but the machine learning in AI is more prone to that. So that's one of their vulnerabilities. And yeah, I understand. In general, there are some issues of trust about the machine learning and AI in general. in any application. So that's why, this is not not officially anywhere written, but I see the trend, and even at FDA, when they want to approve anything related to the AI, they are more careful and try to approve it if a company with another test. So they give that kind of clearance and approval, which means that they are not sure how to trust an outcome of AI. But again, it's a tool, right? And it's it's also depend on the user of the AI too, right? I have seen the studies. I can give particular example that if you look at it mathematically from from the computer science and engineering and mathematic principles, they did all the tests that you want someone to do to show there is no bias. But when you go a little bit deeper, you would say, well, the bias was in the design of the problem, in the training of a machine learning, right? So that they learn as you train them. And if you train them, you can basically, you can, brainwash humans, let alone an AI. So I can give that particular example. There was a study about detecting heart failure, but the group that they studied was super healthy people, like young, less than 30, completely healthy, and advanced symptomatic heart failure, right? So if you have these two groups, you don't need a sophisticated AI or device to do the diagnosis. Just measure the heart rate and you get the diagnosis. So, and that's why important people who are sitting on the other side of the aisle, they need to have a knowledge of both the physics, the physiology, the medicine, and AI to judge it. And that's why, some of the program like Boswell and other programs that train these kind of people are important. People who know all these three: physics, medicine, and AI, all three. And if it's not, it's going to be a huge issues with the AI, both in terms of trust and other ethical issues that may come out of the usage of it.
Rashid, you
Yeah, I think there is the problem of trust, definitely. I think one of the reasons is that the AI is kind of a black box. So people don't know why the answer is. For example, you have heart attack. So they might say, no, I don't have heart attack. Why would you say so? So there is no explanation. And I think recently there is a whole field that is growing. It's called XAI, explainable AI. And that those AI models provide you with some, at least, explanations. So one reason of the issue of trust is being like a black box, like I said. And then as Dr. Pahlevan mentioned, there is issue of bias. And something that I notice is in most of the papers that come out is that they have a very, very large database of normal patients. But when it comes to disease patients, for example, if they want to filter or detect the heart attack, they just have 1/10 of the data. So the whole model is more biased to the detection of normal toward the disease. So I think there is more need for bigger databases of the disease as well.
So that sounds like you might miss gray areas that are
Yes.
not quite clear. Assad, do you want to comment on the downsides of AI?
I do want to come back to the ethical part of it. So for any machine learning algorithm, the algorithm is only as good as the data that goes into it, and that's the basic problem, right? So if you sort of train a machine learning algorithm on a given set of data, it will be really good for that population, and if that the population that sort of gets those kinds of diagnosis, those kinds of checkups is of a certain type, you have inherently developed a tool that's excluding everyone else, right? And I have sort of personal experience of this. We trained a model to, again, sort of predict whether something was malignant or benign. We trained it using USC data, and we were getting accuracy of 80%. We applied the same algorithm without retraining it to data from Cleveland Clinic, and the accuracy came down to 65%, right? Way worse than other conventional tools will do. So it simply did not work, right? And then we said, okay, on a lark, we asked them to take exactly our algorithm, train it on their data, and test it on their data. And once again, they were up to 80%. And when they tested on USC data, on USC patients, and it dropped down to 65% for them too. So the point is, like there is a population shift, right, between the patients that go to either Keck or to County here at USC versus whatever the basin is for Cleveland Clinic.
Sure.
And that population shift, whatever it is, can affect the accuracy by 15%. And that may not seem like a whole lot, but it's the difference between an algorithm being useful than the current state or not being useful than the current state. So I think it's a huge problem.
Yeah, so the issue of population and is the data generalizable to a larger population, that's really an important issue, I think.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions that was being asked, and we may have covered this to some extent, is there an issue of trust of the data? How reliable is the data for various AI models? Can we say anything more about that? Or
I think it can be reliable. It can be not reliable. It really depends on the training, how careful you were during the training phase. But I think it also depends on the data quality when you train. Some of the studies out there is they use a lot of data from a lot of patients, but when you look into their data, the original waveforms, for example, of the measurements, you see that like 50% of the patients, the measurement process at the very beginning was not good.
yeah,
So whatever advanced AI model they use,
Right.
they have issue of the quality of the data in the beginning.
yeah, it's the old garbage in, garbage out concept.
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. So that affects a lot in terms of being not reliable if the data measurement is not good. And another issue is that some of the studies, as Dr. Oberai mentioned, they are just done in one center. So you have, for example, one surgeon, one operator, and you are biased toward one framework. So I think there is need for multi-center studies in future. And another thing that some of the AI models cannot be reliable is that they just rely on the synthetic database. That means they generate their own data, and then they train the AI model, they test it, and then they never test it on the real world data. So that's also another problem, that it can be non-reliable.
Okay, other issues about trust of the data. How reliable is data from these models?
I can add something
Okay,
related to
yeah.
the trust. So human by nature are skeptic toward anything coming new. So the issue of trust is not the consumer's fault. The trust must be gained. So the researchers who are working in the area of AI, especially in medicine, they have to hold themselves to a higher standard to create that trust. And then going back into your question, I mean, trust that the models, one step behind that, which is more important to me, is trust the data that goes in. As you say, garbage in, garbage out. So that is more important rather than what algorithm generates. I mean, I have seen example that the model kind of underperformed because the second site, the data was collected with the much lower quality than the original one, or some sort of bias in the measurement. So it's not just that the AI is very important; it's the data that goes in also very important.
So,
Yeah, maybe a slightly optimistic comment on this. So I think what Rashid mentioned in terms of explainable AI, I think that's a really nice trend. It's headed in the right direction because because then, you're sort of asking the question, okay, you told me this tumor was cancerous. Now, please tell me why you think it is cancerous. Like, what part in the image made you think that this was cancer, right? So I think there are algorithms that are trying to do that. So I think that's a great way to gain trust, right? The other good way to gain trust, and this is another trend in machine learning, is to not only give you the answer, but also provide you with some measure of certainty that, okay, I think this is cancer, but by the way, I'm only 60, 70% sure, right? So I think that's another direction where sort of you're getting not an answer alone, but you're also getting some sense of certainty or confidence in that answer from the machine learning algorithm or from the AI itself. I think those are sort of two positive directions that hopefully can address the trust issue somewhat.
Great. So I have a question specifically for Niema that I want to ask. And Niema, you've been involved in industry and companies and this sort of thing. So can you walk us briefly through the process of advancing AI from research to the market, and what kind of regulatory obstacles might slow the advancement of AI going to the market?
Thank you for the question. The regulatory process is pretty similar to other equipment and devices. You have to find a predicate, and then if it's not, there are other paths. And there are certain standards that you have to satisfy that usually defined by the FDA. It's pretty much the same. But again, when it comes to the final decision, they're more skeptic toward algorithm that use AI for output product. So for example, if you can get the little bit of lower accuracy with an analytical model, physiology-based model, rather than something uses AI, you're better off with the less sensitive, less specific, rather than the one that uses AI. But sometimes you have to, so it's not that much difference. But the current issue is that they don't have a fixed standard either. There are not clear metrics for them. How should we look at diagnosis devices that uses AI? Also, it's not clear how they monitor that. If that device uses an AI that keep refining itself with the data coming in, how they should assess that? Or the other way around, they get biased toward using those data. Maybe they launch it, I don't know, in inland California, and then the machine start, refining the algorithm, and then they start launching in other places like Ohio, like Baltimore. Is it going to be worse? Is the machine going to introduce bias to itself?
Yes.
And none of these things have been figured out yet. So a lot of work to do on their part. But
okay. So as we close, I would like to ask each of you the following questions. What do you see as the future of AI in research, clinical, and home settings to detect and prevent disease, maybe ultimately improving health outcomes for patients? And what is the biggest change that will occur in medicine due to AI? Who wants to start? Okay. Niema.
So what is the biggest change?
What is the biggest change that will occur in medicine due to AI? And how do you see the future of AI in research and clinical medicine and home settings?
Oh, that's difficult to predict. But if you go back and look at these movies, some of these movies in like 60s and 50s, and talking about robot driving, it was like self-driving. It was a robot that's sitting, doing the wheel like that. But we ended up having the driving car, but the car itself driving, not the robot behind the wheel. So whatever I say here it sounds very cartoonish down the road, but I think it's gonna revolutionize preventive medicine for sure. This is something that we are doing very poorly, regardless of the country. We are horrible in preventive medicine, and AI can help a lot, I believe. And we gotta improve all the other aspects of our life and all the other aspects of medicine, from diagnosis to treatment and monitoring. But I think a lot of improvement gonna happen with preventive medicine.
Okay. Assad?
Maybe I'll take a stab at research.
Okay.
And AI helping out in research. So I think, again, one thing that it's really good at is identifying patterns. So with so much data coming at us through so many different really clever experiments and clever inventions, it becomes hard to sort of find out how these are connected to each other. So as an example, one can talk about the progression of a disease, trying to figure out how does a disease actually progress. And so this is where I, again, feel like, sort of the sheer capacity of some of these algorithms to identify initially correlations, but then later, if you sort of use more sophisticated algorithms, even the direction of those correlations, like, this particular thing affects this thing. So there is a causal relation that takes you from here to there. So I think discovering things like those in research is going to be really exciting, and I feel like that's the next step that's going to happen.
Rashid?
Yes, I think AI can play a big role in future in specifically what is called personalized medicine. So recently we have the new technique or new concept, which is called, for example, digital twin. So I think that one is going to be very popular. So what is digital twin? It's basically the virtual model, the virtual twin of you. So it replicates all the physiology, all the behaviors, lifestyle, and everything that you have in the virtual world. So if you want to, for example, take a pill, or if you want to go through interventions or start a new therapy, you can first refer to your virtual model and see how it answers to that treatment. I think digital twin and personalized medicine, these two are getting very popular.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Oberai, Pahlevan, and Alavi, for a terrific session. And we have about 10 minutes to take questions. And I think that Paul and Jessica have the microphones, so let's take a few questions. Dr. Opel, who, by the way, is the former CEO of HMRI. Thank you for coming out tonight, Dr. Opel.
So I have a comment and a slight digression that I think you might appreciate. The question's going to be about Hopfield networks and spin glass systems. And back in the 80s, when we had just combined the cancer and heart and neurological institutes to form HMRI, which we did in 1982, I was pleased to be able to chair the Boswell committee for a few years. And one of the people I asked for who the smartest young faculty member at Caltech was, and they said John Hopfield. And so John Hopfield joined our committee and was on our board for a while until he went east. And as you know, he won the Nobel Prize this year for his work on Hopfield networks. And on his Hopfield network at the time, that you had this array of neurons, and the thing that why they call it a spin glass system is each element, like each neuron, if they were simulating neurons, was connected to one another. And so you had this massive bunch of things, and the thing that it was able to do was to recognize patterns, and it was very robust in the face of things, of noise and corruption and all that. And when he came here, one of the things that he wanted to do was spend time in the lab looking at, if you look at some of the things Dr. Vasudefen's doing now or other things about development of neural tracks, one of the things he was fascinated by was that you could modulate the sensitivity of those connections with intermediate neurons or the action of glial cells or the action of dendritic connections and all that. And he was very appreciative, just looking at our working animal model systems, of how all that worked. And so my question is, as NVIDIA has a system that actually does machine learning to develop better neural networks and develop those intermediate connections that somewhat more accurately reflect how the nervous system is structured. This deep thing that the Chinese have come up with doesn't do that. It's essentially manually trained, and it's that you have to train it. So my question for each of you is, as you evolve your systems, are there ways that, are you relying on things that you have to manually train, or are you able to work with systems that can learn on their own and become more neuromimetic in terms of how they operate? Because it seems to me that's the future, and that's, of course, why NVIDIA went way to the top.
Only easy questions.
Yeah.
I can at least make an attempt. So I think so first of all, it's fascinating that you had interactions with Hopfield and Hopfield Network. So I have actually a question for you. So when you saw that, did you at that time think, oh man, this has a chance of winning the Nobel Prize 30 years or whatever, 50 years from now?
Well, biophysics, you always want to be able to explain things from first principles. And biology, people who see the art in medicine know a lot of times you can't, you have to do empirical things.
Right.
But like physics, you know how it works. Yeah, I think all of us hoped that someday that would happen, but there was not near the computing power then.
To make it happen.
And we're not nearly there now. And we're all chastened by the fact, too, that with IBM's Watson system that went to MD Anderson and to Sloan Kettering, it didn't work very well in oncology at all, and it was a primitive form of AI.
Yeah.
So my question is whether, because I think maybe some of you and some of what HMRI is doing can contribute to the way AI actually works, because the machine learning part of it is what makes it strong in your pattern recognition. And your haystack is not unlike the spin glass that Hopfield liked to talk about.
Yeah. So
multiple connections is what's in your brain.
Right. So I think I think there are two types of algorithms that kind of do what you're referring to. One is called reinforcement learning. So that's basically an algorithm itself selecting what's the next best data to train on. So it is not just blindly accepting data. It's sort of saying, oh, this is a good trajectory to go down on, and sort of going down that trajectory. And by the way, that's one of the key differences between what DeepSeek, the Chinese firm, has done and its competitors have not done. So the US, the NVIDIAs and the Metas, they've sort of gone for like really big systems, just throw the kitchen sink at it. Whereas DeepSeek said, we're going to stick with smaller systems, but we will let them select how to train themselves. So that's reinforcement learning. That's one part. I think what you're referring to is sort of algorithms that change their architecture on the fly. So you imagine you start off with a network which has lots of neurons, lots of layers, lots of connections. And then as you train, you realize that some of these connections are useless. There is nothing flowing through there. And you shut them off, and then you shut some more off. And then in the end, you end up with a network that's just so, where only the important connections are there. So that's also a field that people often look at. There's a particular term for it. I'm blanking on the term for it, but it's basically just the shutting of the connections that are not contributing and ending up with an architecture that is optimal in some sense. So those are cool ideas that are being used and certainly worth looking at.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Larry Jones.
Yes, I have a question for you, Bob. At the end of your talk, you started to allude to something that I was kind of very interested in, and that was, how's the patient look at all this? And 10 years ago, when I practiced medicine and did research with Bill and this kind of thing, it was a very different kind of life for me. But now I just sit and drink coffee all day with patients and when I talked to them this week that we were going to be talking about AI, they said, oh, sure, that's another way of getting farther and farther away from actually looking the patient in the eye. face-to-face time and getting your appointments when you want them. Can you address that part of your last?
Yeah, well,
Because that's where I'm coming from now.
okay. But I actually think that for the patient, AI can be a very, very good thing, and that it may make diagnoses earlier. It may help with preventive medicine. It allows new drugs to be developed. And we've talked about the fact that AI is already being used for drug development. So, I am pretty optimistic, actually, that AI is going to really help the patient. There's going to be some bumps along the road, obviously, but I think in the long run, I think medicine will be better off. Yes, George.
It's not nearly as good as those questions. I just want to say that. But I think of you when you talked about shining your phone light on you to get your blood carotid artery. It reminds me of Star Trek, the TV series. And he had that little multi-lighted machine, and he could tell everything about your body.
Kind of went like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Tricorder, they call
I think that, and that's, we're maybe already there. But my question is, what I hear is data is a little bit of a problem because it's not necessary. It's different at every institute or where they're writing it down based upon an opinion, hate to say this, of doctors or their assistants, how they do that. So how do you overcome that? And the other, well, it's one of the two parts more. One is if you can get the data big enough, I mean, really big, not a few hundred people, but maybe 10 million people, 1 billion people on that particular disease. Of course, you need the algorithms to handle that in the computer, which is my final question. Would that help if it could learn itself as it's going through all this massive amount of data to pick the junk from the good stuff? And are we in order to do it that big, are we talking quantum computers to get to that? And and how would that affect what you're trying to do if in the near 10, 20, 30, 50 years, we actually have a quantum computer that works? That's my question.
Well, I think I can try to answer your question. That's a great question. And I kind of hinted at that. Of course, mathematically speaking, these AI and machine learning, before this terminology, they were being called like data-driven. That means they need the data. And of course, the more data that you have, the better, the more accurate. That's, of course, the case. But having those unlimited data, not possible. I mean, not probable. Let's put it this way. So I think one area of research which is currently active, and I think is not getting too much of attention right now, but compared to coming up with better algorithm, this part is kind of underrepresented, both in terms of number of people involved and number of funding, is that come up with a way to reduce the number of required data. And that is, and in order to do that, you also, in any specific field that you're considering, you need people who know the basic principles of that, the physical principle and physiological principle of that system, in order to come up with a way of reducing the required number of data. And that's an important way to address that. And of course, as we go, maybe the 500 years from now, we don't have the problem of those data because it had been collected. But at this moment, you have to be resourceful in terms of usage of the data and requirement for the number of data that we have.
Thank you. We can have time for one quick question. Anyone? Yes, Dan.
What's the most immediate application that could be used in third world countries as of today?
Third world countries, what would be the most immediate application?
Well, if you come up with something that is cheap and accessible, it doesn't matter if it's in the rural areas in the United States or in a third world country. So it's going to be useful as long as not expensive and easy to use. So if you satisfy these two conditions, you will make a difference.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone again for coming out tonight, and Paul,
Thank you, Bob.
any closing remarks you want to make?
Thank you all for coming here tonight. We look forward to putting on our next President's event in another couple of months. We'll see you then. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, panelists.
Recording stopped.